Now I would like to welcome our first keynote speaker, Dr. Hansen, who is also affiliated with the Danish embassy in Beijing. And he will give the first keynote speech on the international research collaboration, a stepping stone for a green transition. Please, Thomas, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Bo. It is an honor to be allowed to address you here. I would like to share my screen 1 second. And then I have prepared a few slides for you. But it's true, I'm affiliated with the Danish missions, diplomatic missions in China. Actually, I am the Danish Science Associate to China, which means that I'm the diplomat responsible for bilateral collaborations within science, higher education, and innovation. And I'm based in Shanghai at the Innovation Center at the Royal Danish Consulate General here. I have a background in science policy, science administration and evaluation from the Danish Ministry of Higher Education and Science and from the National Research Foundation. And I have also a PhD degree in science studies, where I was looking into academic conferences, the physical, real conferences where people met. And actually my focus area was all the informal things that happen at these conferences, all the coffee talks and beers being had in the bar, and all the stuff that goes on outside of the conference room, all the stuff that we are missing. But this is also a very interesting format, and I think we are experiencing the benefits of having these online events. At least I see a great value in it. I'm actually on a holiday with my family, but I'm attending this conference from a tea room in Hangzhou. So that was just a bit about the context. What I really would like to talk about today is science diplomacy, because what is it? How do we use these diplomatic missions we have around the world to benefit science, and what is it that we're doing? This is one definition of science diplomacy, where you could define it as the use of scientific collaborations to address common problems and to build constructive international partnerships. Exactly what has been highlighted in the previous talks by Birte and Professor Chen and Professor Zhao. Well, if you go one step deeper, the Royal Society in London and the American Association for the Advancement of Science, the AAAS, define 3 forms of science diplomacy. And I'll go through each of them and give some examples. So one could say science in diplomacy, where the aim is for science to provide advice and support foreign policy development. And I think we have a lot of examples of this. The International Climate Panel is providing scientific advice that is actually the foundation for what one could call the greatest diplomatic exercise in history, combating climate change. The scientific advice underpinning these decisions is the diplomatic efforts would be unimaginable without this scientific foundation. But there's lots of other examples. You could see it in biodiversity conventions, redrawing of contested borders. The Danish territory was just expanded with the size of Jutland due to geological investigations of the seabed north of the Faroe Islands. So there's really a great use of scientific advice in foreign policy and in diplomacy. Another way one could talk about science diplomacy is science for diplomacy, where we try to use scientific cooperation as a way of improving and developing international relations. This was very evident in the Cold War, where there was a continuous dialogue between American and Soviet Union researchers. And this dialogue was actually part of forming the foundation for real diplomatic breakthroughs. And we see similar things going on in for example, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but there's also scientists that are continuing to work together, even though the political channels have frozen completely. Also, one could argue that the EU framework programs is a way that this of using scientific cooperation to develop stronger relations between countries. And then finally, diplomacy for science, where we are trying to look into how diplomacy can facilitate scientific cooperation. So this is when we are organizing bilateral calls, for example, between Innovation Fund Denmark and the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology. The SCC, I would also argue, is an example of this. It has taken great diplomatic efforts to establish the SCC, and now we're seeing the scientific collaborations blossom within the framework of the SCC. And I would also argue that the place where I'm working, the Innovation Center Denmark, is an example of diplomacy for science. So what is this Innovation Center Denmark? Well, we are placed at 8 innovation hotspots globally. The first one was established in Silicon Valley in 2006. And soon after, the year after, actually, in 2007, we were establishing our innovation center in Shanghai. And then more have come on a regular basis. Unfortunately, we will close down the one in Sao Paulo at the end of this summer. But maybe it will make another spot open for a new innovation center somewhere in the world. This remains to be seen. And from these innovation hotspots, we are trying to elevate Danish science and innovation by being part of the ecosystems in these hotspots and trying to connect them with the Danish partners. So if we look into our mission, it's really this aspect of bringing home knowledge and establishing partnerships that stand out. And bringing home knowledge also means identifying trends, spotting what's cooking, seeing how science systems are developing, and trying to bring the best experiences back to Denmark. And the long-term partnerships is really an argument where we're saying that you can't establish meaningful relations in a one-off meeting. It takes longer time. And that's why we are so pleased with the SDC, because this is such a strong foundation for a partnership and a framework which we would like to use even more for the as the framework around Sino-Danish collaborations. So really our value proposition is that we are working both with Danish companies and institutions of higher education and research. So ideally, when we approach a Chinese ecosystem, we have a Danish university in one hand and a range of companies in the other, because in that way we can connect to an ecosystem that is established in the same way, where it's not only academics, but also companies. And especially in China, having researchers in one hand really paves the way for companies, because in this country there's such a great respect and for researchers. So having the researchers involved opens door for our companies, and actually also for us as a government. It gives access to other parts of the central administration of China. So we're really happy and pleased with having this kind of academic collaboration as part of our toolbox. When we're looking specifically at the Innovation Center in Shanghai, we have, one could say, 3 key focus areas. It's ICT, the whole digitalization, where there's so much happening in China, where we really want to be at the forefront and looking into trends. Of course, it's sustainability in the broadest terms, but we're looking very much into the building industry and to the energy industry. And then it's life science, because it's also very important. We have a few vacant positions at the moment. So if you know any talented people that are looking for a new job in Shanghai, please have them have a look at our LinkedIn profile where the job descriptions can be found. So how do we work? Well, I have a few examples with me. Here is a trend analysis we did of the Chinese R&D sector, where we were taking 15 technologies that are considered to be important for the green transition of Denmark. It is, for example, biochar or pyrolysis, which is playing an enormous role in the green transition for the agricultural sector, wind energy, solar energy, alternatives to concrete, maritime technologies, and so on. And then we match these technology areas with the state of art in the Chinese R&D sector. And I think the graph you have on the left-hand side of the screen really shows that China plays an enormously important part of all of the areas. Of course, some they play an even more important part, but even the ones that are in the lower left-hand side are quite significant. For example, the green and maritime technologies, where Chinese authors are part of 20% of the 1,000 most cited articles. So really, there will be no green transition without a collaboration with the Chinese researchers. So I think this analysis is actually quite important for a quite good example of how we work. Then we do joint calls. So we've had, last year we had a bilateral call between the Innovation Fund Denmark and the Chinese Ministry of Science and Technology on the theme of sustainable city solutions. This year we've had a call on the 4 green research missions that are laid out in the Danish Green Research Strategy. That was just ended last week, and I'm still waiting to see how many applications we got in. But generally, it's very well sought after. There are not many funds available for collaboration between Denmark and China. And in my view, what we're really missing is some bigger chunks of money to develop even deeper and bigger collaborations, because this bilateral call we have here, it's fairly small money we are talking about. We are down to 4 to 5 million Danish kroners over a period of 3 years. So there is a limit to how much you can do with these joint calls. And I would really like us to see a more ambitious strategy in this field. And then, of course, we have the SCC Highway, as I call it. It's really one of our, well, it is our key, it is the cornerstone of the bilateral collaboration in the field of science and technology and also higher education. And the STC is obviously challenged by the current situation of the inavailability of travels. We're doing all we can to try to open spaces for students to come back to the campus in Huairou, north of Beijing. But it will not happen after the summer holidays. So now we're looking into to the next sort of semester start at the end of the winter break. But this is a key priority for our bilateral collaboration, not only within science and higher education, but in general between Denmark and China. But I must also say that I think everyone who's looking into the STC is quite impressed with how the collaboration has dealt with the challenges formed by the pandemic. Another activity we have been doing at the Innovation Center in Shanghai is a platform project called the Nordic Sustainable Cities. And these kind of platform projects is really a way that we are trying to work with bringing partners together. Another example we have is the blockchain business bridge. And both projects are really based on building a cluster of companies and stakeholders in the one end, so be it in Denmark, that are interested in exploring Chinese partnerships. And then we're building a cluster on the other end who's also interested in this international collaboration. And then we make sure that they meet on a regular basis, have a little funds for making explorative workshops and these kind of things to see if we can find matches. But it's really important that it's not a one-off events, that it's something we're doing on a more long-term basis. So the Nordic Sustainable Cities project has been running for 3 years. And we think this is the necessary way of developing these matches between the clusters, is really to have continuous meetings, and especially when travel is not possible, then the trust building and the networking takes even longer. And then I would say all the rest we're doing at the Innovation Center. So lots of one-off events, handheld activities, a specific researcher that is interested in a dialogue with a Danish partner, then trying to find this partner and do the matching. Or this invitation I have on the left-hand side with Pinduoduo, which has grown to become the largest online retail e-platform in China and actually in the world. And maybe it will revolutionize the agricultural sector of China. So we have established a dialogue with this company, and they developing a collaboration with them. And now we can present what they're doing to a wider audience in the Danish ecosystem. So this is what one could call the trend spotting or something like this. There's a lot of meetings and a lot of times the meetings don't go anywhere, but sometimes they do, and this is highly rewarding and a great motivational support for our work. So I would just like to end on a few ideas of how the international research collaboration will look like, how the future for international research collaboration will look like, and also give a few arguments on why we need China in this equation. So the intertwined part, well, this is one how a lot of people will think of science, maybe not you who are scientists, but when I'm speaking to other civil servants that are not working with science on a regular basis, they tend to think of people being on their own, looking out of the window, getting a great idea and developing it. And as all of us know, this is completely wrong. Science happens in intertwined networks. This is a bit of an extreme example of a physics paper with more than 5,000 authors. But when we look at the aggregated data for scientific publications between Denmark and China, we see that most of the scientific collaborations involve other countries. At least if you add them together, you have the gray line, which is just Denmark and China, and then you have all the rest, which is different variations of 3 to 5 countries, 6 to 10 countries, and more than 10 countries involved. So in this way, we really need to bring this message forward that our collaboration with China is not a Denmark-China collaboration. It is part of global networks where we can't really do without one of them, or we can't just exclude one. We'll need to be involved in these global networks to be at the forefront of our fields. And if you look at the number of countries, or the countries that are involved in the bilateral publications between Denmark and China, I think what I want to show with this graph is that it's a really long tail of countries. So we can't just say that it's Denmark, China, the US, or the UK. It's a lot of different countries. On the number 20 at the end, it says Czechia. So even Czechia is playing an important role in this bilateral collaboration between China and Denmark. This is a message that we need to keep on bringing to the table. But And why do we do it? It's because it increases the quality of our publications. So this is a bit of a complicated table, but what it really shows is the number of top 10% cited publications, or the share of top 10% cited publications. So the lines in bold are the Sino-Danish co-publications. So we see that 20% of the Sino-Danish publications in agricultural science end up being in the top 10% most cited group. This for the other publications excluding China, this is only 16.7% for Denmark, and for China it's only 9%. So really China gains a lot from our collaboration, but so does Denmark. And I think it becomes even more important when looking at a field like engineering and technologies, or the natural sciences, where there's really important gains in our output. But with these words, I would like to open the floor for a bit of discussion or questions. This is the view from my office. I would really hope that you take the chance whenever you get it to come visit me in Shanghai. I do miss having real visits, so please come by, and I can inform you that I'll be in Denmark in the last 2 weeks of June. So if anyone wants a meeting and a sort of face-to-face discussion on where the Sino-Danish collaborations are going, I would be happy to take those meetings with you.